Welcome in everybody, my name is Kaycem and I am going to be going over today how to draw the front side of the torso. We'll be going over things like anatomy, all the forms, and we might even do some rendering today as well. So talking to Bill about shadows and lighting and all of that stuff. But if it's your first time here, welcome into the Kaycem crew. I am Kaycem, I am a Filipino art streamer here on Twitch and I teach everything from anatomy, gesture, perspective, and all things related to character design. And I also currently work full-time in the animation industry for the studio that made Castlevania. So if you guys are interested, make sure to like, subscribe on YouTube and all of that stuff. And I hope you guys enjoy today's stream. Let's go ahead and talk about the torso today. All right. So let's go ahead and lay out first a general structure for the torso. And then from there, we'll kind of work on adding in all the muscles and all that good stuff. I'm going to start off first by just kind of laying out a general structure here for the pelvis and the torso. So just kind of like two boxy structures. And again, I've mentioned this a few times, but you don't have to do it like this. You can draw them as cylinders. You can draw them as kind of a round egg-shaped structures. It's really up to you what you're feeling like. And sometimes it depends on the scene too. So I think we've talked about how for male characters, I tend to go for a more boxy structure, mostly because the proportions of the male are pretty squared off. Usually the shoulders are lined up well with the hips and stuff like that. Whereas for female characters, it tends to be a little bit more of like an hourglass shape. And so I'll use different maybe shapes to denote that as well too. But okay, so we have here our general structure for the torso. That's a nice simple box there. All right. Going back in here, one of the first things I like to do is find that center line here. So we're going to find that center line for that torso. And again, today we're going to be focusing primarily on the torso. So don't worry too much about the head and the hips and the arms and stuff. We're going to kind of cut these out, kind of like what we've done here. And we'll talk about those another day. We'll talk about arm anatomy, hands. We'll talk about legs. We'll do all of those things on a different day. So for today, primarily focusing and isolating our study on the torso, I think will be really helpful. And it sounds like I'm doing well. So the audio is good. Cool. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to talk about some of the things we talked about in the previous stream where we kind of broke down all the forms and whatnot. But I'm going to try to go and focus more on the anatomy today more than anything. Now, one of the first things I want to call out here is the general proportions that we're working with, right? So obviously these are general proportions, and so you can change it up and all that stuff, whether you want to go for a more stylized look, a more realistic look, all of that stuff. It's really up to you. And so I would definitely say just, find what's most comfortable to you, what makes the most sense for your style. But it's good to have a general idea of the structure and forms, so that way we can kind of build off from something. Right. And so some of the things that I'm going to call out here are going to be the collarbone, which is going to be that upper portion there of the box. And this is going to be a very important bony landmark. If you guys, you can find your own collarbone here. Well, technically not everyone has a collarbone. There's that one kid from Stranger Things that doesn't have a collarbone. But for the most part, I would assume that a good number of you do have collarbones. You can find it here. And then halfway from there to where the pelvis is going to be where that 10th rib lands. So that 10th rib is going to be that bony protrusion right here on the sides of your body. And then halfway from the collarbone to your 10th rib is usually where the 5th rib lands, and it's usually where the nipples land as well. So these are, again, generalizations, right? And it might not be exactly halfway, but it's close enough that if you zoomed out on a character, people wouldn't notice if it was like an inch or a centimeter away from that halfway mark. But then 10th rib going down to the bottom there of that box is going to be where that pelvis lands. That's going to be something called the ASIS. That's the anterior superior iliac spine. Don't worry too much about that today because we're not focusing yet on the pelvis. We'll be doing pelvis talks later when we cover legs. All right. So anyways, going back over here. So we got here the torso now. We got all these forms. So let me go ahead and simplify some of these now that we have a general idea of the structure, right? And let me go in here and kind of just find out where I want to place the clavicle. Again, kind of at that halfway mark right here. And then from here, let's just kind of go in and start laying out some of the muscle groups that we're seeing. Now, one of the first ones I want to call out is really going to be, again, this clavicle bone is just so important. I always tell people, if you guys want to get really good at understanding the torso and stuff and how the head connects to the torso, this clavicle bone is probably one of the most important ones to know. If anything, I think it's probably the one to know over some of the other ones. Like the rib cage is good and stuff, but that's like pretty basic. I think the rib cage is kind of just an egg shape. I think the clavicle is really what makes the torso super interesting. Now, the clavicle or the collarbone basically connects over here to a bony protrusion that comes out from the back of the scapula. That's going to be called the acromion process. And as somebody mentioned in the chat, this guy actually has really prominent acromion processes. I don't know if that's the plural for acromion process, but you can kind of see it right here, actually. And what's really important about this is, one, again, this is going to be that landmark of where that clavicle connects to the backside there of the scapula, also known as the shoulder blades. But it's also going to be partially where we're going to be connecting our shoulder muscles to, and also our trap muscles, so the muscles on the back right here, which you'll be seeing that'll help kind of frame the side of the neck there. So it's a pretty nice kind of just muscle group to know, and we're going to be using these first as our general structure as we build out the human torso here. Right now, again, this is going to be a little bit past the beginner friendly intro that we did, because we covered that on day 7. So if you guys want the beginner from the beginning kind of thing, I would highly recommend check out day 7 of the bootcamp, because that's where we cover all the simplified forms and we talk about the rotation and all of that stuff. So today's a little bit more advanced, but I'm also going to keep it nice and simple by showing you guys the basic shapes. And then from those basic shapes, how do you actually turn those into more complex form? But let me go back here. All right, so I'm gonna speed it up a little bit now, right? So let's kind of go down this way here. Let's go find that rib cage section here. We'll kind of lay out the sternum. Now, keep in mind here, I'm not gonna get into too much detail of the anatomy. I don't want to. I mean, maybe we could, but I don't want to go too far in unless you guys want me to go over like all the skeletal anatomy and stuff. I think today I just want to go over more of the general forms, and then you guys can, take it further if you want to, grab more of the resources and practice those things. So usually the sternum right here is going to land at about that 5th rib. Kind of think of it as like a bow tie area right there. And then we're going to go down here. And then I like to kind of find maybe that arch here of the arch there of the sternum, right? But okay, I'm just gonna give you guys a rough gesture. All right, a rough gesture of the anatomical forms, including stuff like the rib cage. So you can imagine the rib cage kind of looks like this, right? Kind of like an egg shape. It tapers out here from the outer portion there of it tapers from the top portion there of the head, and then it kind of works its way down into this egg shape. And then I like to kind of just round it over here to the 10th rib. There's actually a few more ribs down below, but don't worry too much about that. It's like right here. There's like the 11th and 12th set of ribs are down here, but don't worry again about that, because those are not actually going to be showing all too much. The only time I would say to worry about those 11th and 12th ribs are maybe when you are drawing a skeleton creature, right? And you want to be anatomically correct, then yeah, sure. You'll probably want to know those ribs, but otherwise I think those two are not going to be shown on visibly on the skin, so don't worry too much. The rib cage does face forward a little bit here as it gets to the top, and then we'll worry about the pelvis another day, so I'm gonna keep that one nice and simple. All right, but that's gonna be the general structure of the torso on the front side, right? So there's gonna be the clavicle and there's gonna be the rib cage, so that's gonna be kind of the two main components there. But now let's kind of go in here and let's lay out the actual anatomy of the front side here. Now, we've talked about the neck pretty extensively, right? So we have here the sternocleidomastoid. It's always hard to say. But that one's going to basically be a connection here from the side of the ear as it kind of goes down, and then it fans out to the front side here, the clavicle. And then it also actually connects to the other portion of the clavicle right here. So this upper kind of portion here basically creates that that anatomy of the neck, right? As we kind of go here, we're going to fan this one out a little bit. And then from there, let's go in and here on the, I'm kind of going to gloss over these mostly just because these are, going to be just the backside of the anatomy and also the neck. So I'm not going to worry too much about them, but these are going to be the trap muscles. And those are actually going to connect over here on the latter, kind of like latter fourth, latter third of the traps. All right. So far, not too crazy, I would say. Hopefully not. But now let's go ahead here and going back to the art here. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to lay out the pectoral muscles. Now, here's what we're going to do for the pectorals. Okay. Actually, before then, let's talk about the arms. I'm going to simplify the arms really quick. But the arms are kind of cool because it's basically here going to be the deltoid muscle, which is going to connect again to the clavicle. We have here some connections to the acromion process, and then the arms the deltoids kind of taper into here, and then you have an overlap there from the pecs, the arms, and so forth. So, but again, I'm going to just chop this one out because I'm not worried too much about the arms today. But okay, moving over here now to the pectoral muscles. Now, what's really cool about the pecs are that one, the pec muscles are actually going to be connecting to, I would say, about the 2/3 here of the clavicle, 2/3 of the 2/3 there of the collarbone. It's also going to connect here to the sternum, and then from there it's going to fan out and then insert into the humerus bone here. So that kind of that bicep underneath, or sorry, on top of the bicep, I should say, not underneath the bicep. And so the way that that's going to look like is it's actually going to fan out. So I usually do it like this. So kind of that first connection here at the start of the clavicle, it's going to go down. Then you're going to have that halfway mark going in here as well. And then you're going to have this portion right here. And then you'll have this smaller portion of the pectorals kind of like right here. And so that's kind of the general structure. And again, these are going to insert into the arm there and kind of wrap around that upper humerus bone. And it's going to create a fan-like shape. You don't got to worry too much. Let's see here. Hey, welcome in, everybody. Anatomy proportions is hard, also different poses. Yeah, so again, this is why I always tell people, before you jump into doing anatomy, focus on understanding the general shapes first, right? Because if you want to get into doing all of this stuff with the anatomy, and you want to do them in different poses and do all that stuff, it's actually much better to understand the simplified shapes first, like these here that we've done, and then be able to understand how the anatomy inserts into these shapes, inserts into these components, and then be able to, do all that. All right, so let's go ahead here, and I'm going to lay out now. This portion here is going to be called the serratus muscles. All right, so the serratus muscles are really cool because basically the serratus muscles are going to insert into the sides there of the rib cage, and I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. But you're going to be seeing it on both sides. They're going to originate from the back of the scapula, the back of the shoulder blades, and then they're going to wrap around the sides of the rib cage there. And also it'll kind of help create a little bit of that volume on the side of your torso, along with the lat muscles in the back there. So right here, you can kind of see this is the serratus muscles. Again, these are going to wrap around from the back side of the scapula there. They're going to kind of connect here to the rib cage in kind of this fan-like structure. And then they're going to kind of interweave with the oblique muscles, and that'll create that zigzag pattern that you'll sometimes see in muscular people. We'll be doing that right now for this one here. And one of the easiest things I like to do to find where the serratus arch is going to be is I go and look for the clavicle section there, and I imagine wrapping around diagonally here like this, across that rib cage, imagining there was a volume there for that rib cage. And then from there, we can kind of go in and let's start adding in some of the details. All right, but before we actually talk about the side muscles here, let me go ahead and kind of lay out where we want the general placement for the abdominal muscles, all right? Before we talk about the sides there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to kind of draw the abdominal muscles, aka the abs, that six-pack and all of that stuff. And the first thing that I like to do is I actually like to just find here from that fifth rib. So again, this is going back to that fifth rib section that we talked about here. I like to kind of just go in first lay out a tapering from that 5th rib section. You can imagine it kind of going all the way down here for the abdominals. And sometimes what I like to do is I like to kind of find where those nipples are, maybe like right here, and then from those nipples, kind of use that as kind of an arching point to find the tapering there of the abdominals. All right. But anyways, going back in here, so let's talk about how to figure out the 6-pack. All right. So what's really cool about the 6-pack is basically from that 10th rib that we've already laid out here. What I like to do is I like to kind of find where I want that second set of abs to be. So maybe like right here is where we want them to land. And then from there, I'm going to go from the top of where we had that sternum. All right. So this is going to be kind of like right there. And then we're going to go halfway from basically that portion. And that's where we're going to have that first set of abs. All right. So it always has some landing points here. So again, my landing point here is going to be that second set right here is where that 10th rib starts. It can sometimes be lower. It can sometimes be higher. It really depends on the character, the anatomy, and all that stuff. So different characters will have slightly different structures. But from there, I'm going to go down halfway, kind of roughly where that belly button's going to land, right about here. Let's make that belly button go this way. And then that's going to be where that third set of abs are going to land. Okay. So I'm keeping it nice and simple as a grid so far, but I'll add all the details and stuff in a bit. But you can imagine right there, this is going to be the 40-ounce section, which is going to just kind of the lower obliques that are going to, or sorry, the lower abdominals that are going to kind of wrap around here for the pelvis. All right. So with that being said, now we can go in here and actually start laying out the 6-pack and stuff that you guys are maybe familiar with. So we're going to kind of go in here for the abs, and it really depends on how you want to structure the abs. Again, some characters will have more defined abs, some might not. What I like to do is I like to kind of double up on the lines here, because there usually is a gap between each set of abs. There's kind of a as the muscles wrap in here and kind of create and have separations. I think the separations are called tendons. Are those the tendons or ligaments? I always forget, but there are separations between each muscle group. And those separations is what basically creates that abdominal, that ab look that you might be familiar with, right? So we're going to go in here and I'm going to kind of just open up kind of that midsection, finding those lines that we have. And then from there, we're going to go in and I'm just going to kind of lay out a few more of the abs, right? Breaking out those sections there. And then I'll talk about how these groups actually work together with the serratus muscles that we talked about earlier and those oblique muscles on the sides. Okay. You can kind of imagine kind of a zigzaggy pattern there. And now let's go in on the side again. Now we can talk about the obliques and the serratus now that we've established the structure here for the abdominals. All right. But hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully the abs now that you see it and kind of see the logic there, hopefully it makes it a little bit easier to draw abs. I think abs are still difficult in general, but you know, makes it a little bit easier. And one of the things you can do to make your abs look a little bit more appealing as well is to kind of work in here the oblique muscles on the side. Now, the obliques are interesting because there are basically two sections to the oblique muscles. These are going to be the muscles on the side of your body here, which again line in between the rib cage, connect to the abs, and also connect to the pelvis. And it's kind of that chunky section there. So there's going to be two sections to the obliques. Okay, you have the lower section there, which is called the flank side of the obliques, and then you have here the thoracic portion. Now, again, don't worry too much about all the terms and stuff. If that's like maybe a little bit more advanced, just focus on how there's two sections there. The lower half is going to be more, it's a little bit more chunky, kind of this section right here, and then you have that upper section right here, which is going to be what's inserting in between the abdominals and the serratus muscles. All right. So, you know, this one you can stylize. I think I've seen a lot of artists, you know, stylize this section right here. They kind of go in, you know, you can have fun with this for sure. So I'm going to go in here, maybe add a few kind of lines, you know, breaking it up now and adding it and inserting it into the abdominals that we have right here. Right. And then that's going to interlock again between kind of these digits of the obliques with the abdominals now, and that's going to create again that zigzag pattern that we mentioned earlier. But there you go. And then from there, we're going to kind of wrap it out now and simplify and kind of merge those last couple sections there. And not every line has to be drawn. So again, you don't have to, just because we're doing an anatomy tutorial and you want to make a character look and feel anatomical, you don't have to draw every line. So I usually kind of just soften some of the lines out, erase a few things, simplify them, and so forth. So it's really up to your preference what you want to denote for your design of your character. Well, let's go in here and let's kind of wrap out now with that lower portion of the obliques right here. So we're going to kind of taper that in, and there you go. Easy peasy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it on the other side here. I'm going to move some things around, and I think we've pretty much covered the upper body torso anatomy here, right? Again, this is more of like a diagram drawing. So I'll show you guys, maybe we'll render this one out a little bit. It's a little bit more aesthetic and less looking more like an anatomical illustration. In the case of the torso in perspective, more forward than the hip, how should it be applied? How much more in perspective are you talking about? Because I would say the general idea should still be the same. Again, you have to think of these things as insertions in the body and not as just like stickers that you put on top of a box, right? So what I mean by that is basically, let me go ahead and draw this one out real quick. But what I mean by that is if you can draw out those simple shapes that I mentioned to you guys earlier, things like the box, these boxy structures, right? If you can do that in perspective, then I think you'll be able to draw all of this. So I think that's the first step, right? If you can draw a box in perspective, like let's say you have this shot like this, right? Where you have like maybe the pelvis tilting a little bit down and so forth, right? Some cool, like dynamic, crazy shot like this. All right. If you can do this, you've basically done half the battle already, because from here, all you need to do now is say, okay, cool. Halfway from here to here in perspective, that's going to be the 5th rib. This is going to be that 10th rib right here. Let's go ahead and find that arch here of the rib cage. Let's go find that clavicle section right here. Bring that back here like so, right? This is going to be the acromion process on this side like that. Bringing that down here, you got here the torso, and you got here the pectoral muscles. Those are going to insert upward like so. And so again, it all is a matter of understanding the perspective first and understanding the basic forms. And then once you're from there, okay, cool. Let's go find that halfway mark now for the abdominals, right? You can kind of see how I'm building up that structure piece by piece, going in here. And then we're going to kind of add in the zigzag patterns that we talked about, right? Maybe we'll go like this. How do you know how big to make the basic shape? So we've talked about that too, right? So again, these basic shapes right here, I will show you guys right now. This is the simplest thing you could do for understanding the torso. Take again the clavicle here. Watch this. Ready? Let me lower the opacity here so you guys can see. Watch this. Easiest technique you can do for understanding how to draw the torso. Simple. Okay. 3, 2, 1. You go in here. All right. You're going to line up that torso right there, that clavicle. Again, you're going to line up here, the 10th rib right here. Okay. So what do you have? You have basically a box-like structure for that clavicle and that 10th rib. Again, this is like a square, a nice simple square. You're going to take that square, watch this, tilt it a little bit for the pelvis. And what do you have now? You have here the line of the bottom of the pelvis, because again, this is just crotch, fat, and all that stuff. All right, we're not gonna worry about that too much. But the bottom there of the pelvis, the bottom there, that pelvic bone, is gonna be from here to here. So all you got to do, draw 2 squares, right? From that halfway mark right here, what do we have? The lining here, that 5th rib and the nipples. If you go halfway here, what do we basically have? Roughly, we have here the pelvis going this way. Obviously, you got to add a little bit of tilt and stuff. But now what you have here, take a look at that. The torso. So it's basically going to be 2 squares, right? So 2 cubes here, not 2 cubes, but 2 rectangular shapes there. Halfway mark here for the pelvis, halfway mark here for the 5th rib. And that's basically this diagram right here. So again, if you can draw that, right? All you got to do is this. I'll show you. I have a cheat sheet for this. If you can draw that, then basically you can go in here, make it a little bit more complex. You can even make it more circular if you want it to be more of an egg-shaped form. You can tilt it however you like. You can make it look down, look up, all of that stuff there. And there you go. Again, I always tell you guys, don't worry about the anatomy. The anatomy is all the complex stuff, all right? First, learn and understand the basic shapes, the basic volumes, because if you can do that, I'm gonna tell you right now, that's like 90% of the struggle of learning how to draw the human body, those basic shapes, okay? But there you go. All right, but anyways, landmarks. So again, a couple of the landmarks I look for is a chromium process right here, that clavicle right here, so that lining right here, the clavicle. Other landmarks I'm looking for are going to be that 10th rib right here, if it's visible. Other things I'm looking for are going to be the iliac crest of the spine right here. And notice how I'm focusing primarily on the skeletal landmarks, right? I'm not focusing on the muscle groups and stuff because different bodies will have different muscle variations. You'll also have body fat too. So if you guys are curious, by the way, on my last stream, day 7, we actually talked about body fat distribution and where you're going to be seeing a large majority of body fat, both on males and females, because you'd actually be surprised that females have different body fat distributions than males do. Meaning, as you increase the body fat percentage, it'll actually look different for men than it will for women. All right. So just an interesting fun fact there. But anyways, these are going to be the general landmarks in the front side of the body that I'm looking for. Other things I'm looking for too is that sternum right here. So those are going to be these are going to be the kind of general landmarks I'm looking for. And they're mostly going to be skeletal there. All right. But all right, let's go ahead and we'll kind of utilize the same technique. So I guess I will talk about them. I will talk about the basic shapes and stuff, only because I know that you guys are probably would want me to go over some of the basic shapes and all of that. So let me go ahead and lay out here kind of just the torso for this girl here, and then I'll talk about how I kind of shape this one up a little bit more. All right. So right now, all I'm really doing is I'm kind of finding that outline here for the hips, you know, just finding those shapes. And I'm not focused too much on all the crazy details here that I'm seeing. I'm just going to keep it nice and simple, right? A nice arch there for the hips, the backside, maybe a little bit of an arch right here for the volume. And we're just keeping that shape nice and simple, not too complicated. I always tell people, like, you don't have to follow the reference exactly. So here I'm tilting. Actually, you know what I should do? I should probably actually tilt her torso this way now that I'm seeing her positioning. So let me actually do that real quick. But it's again, you don't have to follow the reference exactly. So I'm going to change it just a little bit here now that I'm seeing her reference. But again, you can change it to whatever you want it to be, because the human body is pretty flexible. So I am just tilting it here, so that way I'm laying down the horizon line to be kind of higher up, like so, just to kind of give it more of an interesting, we're like looking up at the character kind of thing, you know. But I could have lowered it as well, so I could have moved the horizon line down here, in which case what we would be seeing, actually we would still be seeing. Sorry, I'm going to say I put the horizon line here, but I could have moved it up here, in which case we would see the top plane here and we would see the bottom plane here of that pelvis a lot more. But you know what? I could go like this too. So again, it's really just a matter of your preference. So what I did here was, if you want to do it more anatomically correct to the pelvis, you can kind of go like this, like that, and then you can kind of line this one up. But for me, what I wanted to do was kind of bring in some of the abdominal muscles and kind of just taper that out there. All right, so just subtle changes. But what I like to do is I like to kind of just find the curvature first. I'm going to find kind of that arch here of that volume, just to kind of give it some, you know, give it some visual form. You don't have to do any of this stuff. I'm just kind of laying these out here, and we'll kind of correct a lot of this stuff as we go. And you know what? I'm going to add the neck. I don't know why I didn't add the neck earlier, but let's go ahead and do that real quick. And then from that neck, I'll go in and add I'll kind of fix it up a little bit more. Just moving that clavicle down a bit. And then we're going to wrap some things around here. I want to try to fix this one up a little bit here. So we have here the torso, right? And this fanning out here of the obliques, or of the abdominal section here. And then here, I think we're going to lower this one down to kind of match the pelvic bone. And then from there, we should actually raise this one up a little bit higher to kind of match the perspective of the perspective there of these. And then we're going to bring that up there. Okay, cool. Big rendering tip: if you use line art, lower the opacity of the line art occasionally. Really helps you see the shading rendering to work better. Yeah, there's actually so many tips that I can share with you guys just from the one that I've been doing now. But that is a good one, 100%. Okay, but let's talk a bit about the anatomy of this one really quick. I think this is interesting because she's a leaner model, and so sometimes it's harder to understand and see the anatomy. And this is why I always tell people, like, if you want to study anatomy, you know, try to avoid, at least at the beginning, try to avoid references where you can't even really see the anatomical forms. It's oftentimes better to see and reference and study muscular characters, both men and male and female, because that way you can actually find the anatomy on the body. But I'll talk about it on this on a more lean character like her. And then from there, maybe we have some time to do some rendering practice actually. So I might render these torsos out for you guys. So again, first call outs are going to be that clavicle bone. Always important to understand the clavicle. If you guys don't know where the clavicle is, that is going to be right here. So look, Twitch, don't ban me. I'm actually here. I'll do this so I don't get banned off of Twitch for showing a little skin. But right here, okay, kind of where your neck meets your torso, if you touch yourself here, all right, educationally, of course, you will find the clavicle bone here, and it actually goes from this kind of the middle portion of your torso, the sternum, and if you touch it, follow it all the way along there, you will find that it actually connects to something called the acromion process. All right, so there you go. Try that yourself at your own time. Just, you know, don't ban me off of Twitch. Educational, yeah, it's 100% educational, guys. I'm not promoting anything else out here. Yeah, you never know with these standards out here. But anyways, this is going to be that deltoid muscle there. I'm going to simplify it out, but if you guys did want to cover the deltoids a little bit more, stay tuned, because in a future stream we will definitely be going over the deltoids. All right, so just not today, but if you wanted to, basically the deltoid muscles can be thought of as three shapes. You have here the large portion of the deltoid there, and then you have kind of these inner two portions, one on the front side, on the back side, so posterior and anterior, and these are just going to taper again. So these actually go further into the arm like so, but we're not focused on deltoids today and the arm muscles. But next up here, we have the pectoral muscles again on this side. The main difference between the male and the female really is that you're going to have more volume there for the boobas, right? So that's going to be that volume here that we drew earlier. That's going to be this one like so. And the way that I draw boobas is I find first kind of that connection here of the pectorals, of the that breast section there, and then from there I'm going to kind of round out that section kind of like a teardrop shape, maybe add a little bit of an arch right here just to kind of visualize the volume that's going on, and that's about it. That's about it for that boobas section, that breast section there. Then we're going to have that center line right here. We're going to have that sternum on the other side like so. And then we're going to go in and do the same thing on this side here with the pectorals, again, connecting from that sternum into that arm there. Boom, boom, boom. But then don't forget there's some volume here for the breasts. And so those are going to wrap around like so. I like to add, again, a little bit of an arch right here just to kind of get a visual of that. But every model is different. So Not all characters are going to have gigantic watermelons and stuff. But if you guys did want to, like, okay, let's say you wanted to make the boobas are a little bit larger. Oftentimes you'll see that volume changing right here all the way down to that volume there of the breast. So you can kind of see how already we're adding in some volume, you know, making it a little bit bigger, because again, the size is really going to change primarily overall and not just like one section of it. So you got to kind of think about the overall volume there if you wanted to do something like that, right? So there you go. And then you can keep going more and more. People want more, and you can just keep making it bigger and bigger. But again, you have to do it as an overall volume, not just certain sections, right? Okay. But going back here, now we're gonna go lay out the abdominals. You're not really gonna see the serratus muscles there, but if you were kind of curious, they'd be like right here, with the obliques kind of inserting there, and then you're gonna have that flank portion right here of the obliques. And that's kind of it for this one. She has some pretty defined abdominals, which I think are cool. To find the abs, I like to go in again at that 5th rib, or sorry, the 10th rib right here. Find that pattern there. Halfway there from the torso is going to be that first section of ribs right here. And again, she's a much leaner character, right? So we're gonna kind of give her that benefit of the doubt there for that leanness on her muscles. Here we're gonna have kind of that final set there of the ribs, or not the ribs, sorry, the abs, and then there you go. We have there the abdominals. So that's kind of the general structure that I go with when I'm looking for anatomy. But again, not all characters are gonna have super defined anatomical features. So if you are studying some anatomy for your characters, make sure you're trying to get the good references that actually showcase those things, because otherwise you might be just struggling there. But okay. With that being said, let's go over some rendering today. So I'm going to render out these forms with you guys, so that way I get some practice today. But also, if you guys are curious about rendering and coloring and stuff, we can color these out. But cool. Let's go ahead and do some rendering today. We'll talk a bit about that. All right. But otherwise, thank you for those of you who are watching from YouTube. That is going to be basically the torso front side anatomy. All right. If you guys want to see the rendering stuff that I'm going to be doing, come catch me on Twitch where we do this stuff live. We got bot hit so quick. Bots are up and early today.